Welcome back, troops. Let's tab 59. We'll talk about colours. Now, in the British infantry, we carry colours. Most British infantry regiments will have colours. There's a few exceptions, and I'll try and touch on them. Now, before I get into that, I can't really talk about what our Royal Navy brothers and sisters have, or our Royal Marines, or the Royal Air Force. They have their own version of this, so I'm going to be talking about the British Army's infantry. So what are the colours? Basically, they're flags, but we don't refer to them as flags. We refer to them as colours. Yes, we have flags, we've got the Union flag, etc. But we have colours. What are they? Well, most infantry regiments carry or hold two colours. They have the King's colour and they have the regimental colour. And the reason we had these colours was that in wartime, back in the old days, if you look back at Waterloo and times like that, big formations of troops in their red coats on the battlefield, cannon going off, smoke everywhere, very confusing for soldiers to know where they should be, where their rally points, etc. should be. And so each regiment with its own distinct colour, and the King's colour. The King's colour consists of the Union flag, and then in the centre of that will be maybe the regimental cap badge or the royal cipher, depending, and that's known as the King's colour. The regimental colour will be the colour of the unit's uniform facings. Now, we were the red coats, as you know, but on the cuffs of the red tunics and on the lapels, maybe the epaulets as well, we call those areas facings, and they would be different colours depending on your regiment. Now, for instance, today, the Princess of Wales's Royal Regiment, our facings are a marigold yellow colour. Before that, the buffs, they had like a buff colour facings. Some regiments had green facings. And so whatever your regiment's facings were, the colours of your facings, that was generally speaking what colour your regimental colour would be. And in the centre of that regimental colour would be your cap badge or a cipher of your regiment. Now, in 1743, because everyone was sort of doing their own thing, there wasn't much uniformity, it wasn't very standardised. And in 1743, King George II decided to have a royal warrant to try and standardise it a bit. And so he'd agreed that, yes, the King's colour would be the Union flag with the bits and pieces on it. And the regimental colour, yes, it'd be the colours of the regiment. But also on the regimental colour, in the upper corner, would be a smaller Union flag. That had to be on the regimental colour as well. So that's what they had. And as I say, that gave troops somewhere to rally in the fog of war, in battle. They could recognise their colour. How did they recognise their colour? Because it was trooped. Now, today we have the troop in the colour. It's normally on the King's birthday, his official birthday in Horse Guards Parade, and they troop the colour. And many of you have seen it. It's the guards usually, isn't it? In open order in their ranks, and the colour party, which is an ensign, and the colour sergeants will slow march the colours down between each rank. The ranks, the soldiers stood there, will be at present arms, saluting the colour, and they will walk slow march down so that every soldier, every man, woman there on parade could see the regimental colour and identify it. And of course, there's battle honours on those colours as well, and I'll come on to that soon. So that was the idea of trooping the colour. It would be trooped on a regular basis back in the day, and therefore the soldiers would easily recognise the colour during battle. Now, as I say, battle honours were then stitched onto little scrolls of battle honours the regiment had got. And again, that was a bit sort of ad hoc and all over the place. But it was in up until 1914, which is the start of the Great War, and it was referred to as a Great War because it wasn't called World War I until we'd had World War II. It was always called the Great War. So up until 1914, I have to refer to my bit of paper this. Don't like scripting it, but I'll grab a bit of paper for this one. So yeah, in 1914, battle honours were only on the regimental colour. They weren't on the King's colour, only on the regimental colour. But in 1924, so 10 years after the start of the Great War, in between the war years, between World War I and World War II, it was increased. They decided that you could have up to 10 Great War battle honours on the King's colour. Because obviously these regiments are very old and they get amalgamated, and so they inherit battle honours from previous forebear regiments. And the old flags, the colours, started to get a bit crowded with battle honours on the regimental colour. So the King, at the time in 1924, said you can have up to 10 Great War battle honours on the King's colour. And then in 1956, so 11 years after the end of World War II, that was increased. And you could then display a further 10 World War II battle honours on the King's colour. That's 1956. 2 years later in 58, because of so many amalgamations, 2 or 3 regiments coming together, being amalgamated into one new regiment, meant they were carrying across their battle honours from their forebear regiments. So these battle honours were increasing all the time. Some were the same. Many regiments fought in the same battle and got the same battle honours, but it was increasing all the time. So in 1958, you were allowed to have up to 40 colours. 40 battle honours on each colour. So you could have 40 on the regimental colour and 40 battle honours on the King's colour. Due to amalgamations. Now, today, that's been increased up to 43 battle honours. So any regiment can have up to 43 battle honours on each colour. As I say, these are small scrolls awarded for that particular regiment's daring deeds in a particular campaign or war or battle. You can see them on all the colours. The colours are really important because it gives you that esprit de corps. They're not carried into battle anymore. Obviously, they're ceremonial only. However, when battalions deployed overseas to Iraq and Afghanistan, the colours would have been taken and they would sit in the regimental headquarters, wherever that was, in that particular campaign. Not on the battlefield, but actually taken with them overseas. Who carried the colours? Well, it was always an ensign. Right back in the day, a young ensign. He could be very young. He could be 16, 17 years old. A young officer, an ensign, would carry the colour, one of the colours. And of course, they were a target. He's front and centre with his colour, whether it's a King's colour or the regimental colour. He's front and centre on the battlefield. Obviously blazing away, big yellow flag or green flag, blue flag, whatever, next to the King's colour. On the battlefield, big target. And more often than not, the poor ensign would get knocked out. He'd get killed. The enemy would see that, and it's great. If you can capture a colour, and if you're in a CO of a unit responsible for the King's colour or the regimental colour, and you lose it in battle, it's pretty bad news for your career. You're out the window. So they decided to add protection to the colours, the ensign carrying the colours, that they would have some experienced sergeants. And hence we then got the new rank of colour sergeant. And the colour sergeants would be with the colour party, with the ensigns, protecting the colours. Many times ensigns would be killed. Another officer, young officer, or somebody would pick up the colours, they'd get killed. And sometimes it went right down to senior ranks and even lower, to more private soldiers, mere private soldiers, picking up the colour to keep it going forward and protecting it. Rally round the colours. So that's where trooping the colour come from. That's who carries the colour and who protects it. Now, when the colours get too worn, or they're going to be replaced with new colours, which has happened quite recently, obviously, with the King coming to the throne, King Charles III coming to the throne, what happens to the old colours? Well, they don't get disposed of. They'll get laid up, maybe in religious places like cathedrals that are relevant to that regiment, or sometimes they're put into museums, but they're certainly not destroyed. Now, as I say, infantry regiments carry 2 colours, the King's colour and the regimental colour, but there are some exceptions. For instance, the Guards Division, the 5 infantry regiments within the Guards Divisions, 3 of them, the Grenadier Guards, the Coldstream Guards and the Scots Guards, have a third colour. They have 3 colours, but they only carry that third colour on parade when there's a monarch present. They don't carry it as the norm. The rifles, the light infantry and the Royal Gurkha rifles, they don't have colours. Not that they're not brave enough to have colours or whatever, but when you think about the role that they had and have, their role limits them to be deployed back in the day with colours on the battlefield. Remember, the rifles and the Royal Gurkha rifles didn't wear the red coats that the rest of the British infantry. They wore the green jackets, the green coats, the green jackets. That's where that come from. And of course, they're skirmishers. They're cutting about the battlefield, doing all sorts of, I mean, they're the forebear in a way, the light infantry. You could look at them as a forebear of special forces. They had the best rifles. They had rifles rather than muskets early on. And as I say, they were wearing green rather than the bright red. So it'd be stupid for them to be carrying colours around the battlefield. They worked in small groups, skirmishers. Now, I say they don't have colours, however, they still have battle honours. With the case of the Royal Gurkha rifles, they carry, on parade, they carry the Queen's truncheon. It's an ornamental truncheon made of silver and stuff, with all sorts of stuff engraved, and I don't know exactly what's on there. And that's carried on parade with them, a truncheon. I mean, it'd be quite difficult. These colours, even today's colours, they're carried at the quick march and at the slow march, and they're quite heavy old beast. They're not just some flimsy flag you get off Amazon. This is a big lump of silk, all emblazoned with gold thread, etc., and a heavy stave. Now, you can imagine the light infantry, the speed they march at. There's no way they'd be able to carry one of those around on parade. So they're an exception to it. There is 2 other units in the British Army, 1 infantry, 1 artillery, that have more colours. Now, the infantry regiment is the Royal Yorkshire Regiment, and they have, I believe, 5 colours. Not sure too much on the details on that. Anyone there from the Royal Yorkshire Regiment? Due to amalgamations, I believe, but they have 5 colours, I think. Now, the Honourable Artillery Company, which is a reserve unit in the British Army, it's not a regular army unit, they're a reserve unit. Very old, very traditional regiment, the Honourable Artillery Company. They have colours. Now, the Royal Artillery in general don't have colours. The Honourable Artillery Company do. The artillery in general, their guns are their colours. So the artillery, King's Troop, and the normal Royal Artillery, and especially Honourable Artillery Company, they will have guns as their colours. So there's a little bit of an insight into the complicated system that is the British Army. You know, I mean, to units out, to soldiers or people outside the UK, when you look at our armed forces, all the differences, so many different forms of headdress, cap badges, different colours, depending on what regiment you're in. We've got all these different little traditions and quirks that we've kept over the years. Some of it's been lost in time through amalgamations of disbandments, etc. But there's still a lot there. And I thought it was quite an interesting subject. And I thought I'd talk about the colours and how important they are to us. So we don't call them flags, they're colours. Save the colours. It's quite a famous scene, I think, in the Zulu film. Not Zulu, the other one, Zulu Dawn, where they do lose the Queen's colour, as it was, and Queen Victoria was on the throne then. So it was known as the Queen's colour, not the King's colour. They lose their colours, but I think they retrieve them back again. But if colours are lost in battle, it's a real career ender if you're a CO, especially for the people that have lost it. Like I say, turn back up at Horse Guards, lost the King's colour or the regimental colour. It's not going to go down too well. So there you go, just a little insight into the colours. If you're new to my channel and you haven't subscribed, please consider supporting me and helping the channel grow a bit. I think I've just hit 21,000 subscribers in just over 2 years. The channel had its second birthday, I believe, in July this year. We're now just into September. So in just over 2 years, I'm at 21,000, which isn't bad for a small channel with no flashy graphics, no script, just some old git walking around with a day sack on and his old berry on, which I'm still getting stick for. Why are you walking around with a berry on, with a little day sack on? You're not tabbing. No, I'm not tabbing, I'm walking, aren't I? But when I'm not on camera, I'm going at a fair old speed. I tab round. But I can't tab around at tabbing speed and talk and hold a selfie stick. I'm too old for that. So anyway, I'll say, if you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing. I'm not saying do it, I'm saying consider it. Take care of yourselves, everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy. Until next time, remember, less tab.